understanding that I almost endured that culture or that environment growing up in New York City, growing up to a Puerto Rican mother and a Jamaican father, both cultures that are fiery, both cultures that expressive, and then an expressive city. And coming out of that, not just introversion, but then my conditioning almost had me sway socially to seclusion or to, not being expressive on purpose.
For survival.
Yeah. Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content and this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast. I can remember the day when I learned the difference between being an introvert and being an extrovert. You've probably heard these terms thrown around, and they often get misconstrued as basically being better socially around others.
That's a lie.
That is oftentimes the way that it gets presented. And I remember when I realized and learned, specifically, I believe it was you, Jim, that introversion and extroversion is more about how we gain and receive energy and lose energy.
At least a large part of it, yep.
And what that did for me was that freed me up to develop my social abilities as a leader, because I was no longer now handicapped by this idea that as an introvert, I could not be, adept socially and be able to engage people and be able to have conversations. And so today we're talking about self-awareness and the importance and the value and why leadership of any kind in any space is predicated on self-awareness. I'm your co-host today, Winston Harris, joined by Jim Piper. Jim, how are we doing today?
We are doing wonderfully well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm self-aware.
You're self-aware. That's great.
We're talking about self-awareness because here at the Today Count show, I mean, we talk about leadership and how everything rises and falls on leadership. And we have to start with this urgent topic of self-awareness. Jim, in your estimation, why is self-awareness one of the most overlooked leadership skills out there?
Well, to speak to it frankly, I think a lot of people don't give it time. A lot of people poo-poo it. They think it's silly. I mean, after all, where was self-aware? I mean, how many times have you heard people say, "Well, that's just who I am," but what does that mean? That's just who I am. And that sounds like a fixed mindset to me. I am who I am. I can't change. That's a really sad thing. I think self-awareness is a great place to begin understanding oneself. And I think understanding oneself leads to all kinds of positive places.
Yeah, and we're assuming because you're listening, because you're watching, you've joined the podcast in some form or fashion, engaged with the content in some way, that you're wanting to become a better leader. That's our assumption. That's what we're going to presume. And because of that, we're presenting this idea. Jim, talk us through why or how or can self-awareness help people become better leaders?
I remember when my junior high basketball coach asked me who I was and what I was doing to get better. No one had ever asked me that question. Who I was? Well, I'm Jimmy Piper. That's who I was. And getting better, I wake up in the morning, eat my cereal, and go play. I mean, but he gave me permission to think about who I am and who I could be. I'll give you another story. The other story is, most people who've gone to college, usually there's some sort of assessment that they have the kids do to try to help them figure out what major to pursue. And, they do a lot of that based upon what they call these personality assessments or cognitive assessments, or they have different, names, for them. But what I was always amazed at when I worked for Bank of America, they always seemed to be a step ahead of me. They always seemed to know what my next move should be in my career. And one time I finally stopped my boss and say, man, you had me do this. I did it for 18 months. You had me do this. I did it for 24 months, and et cetera, et cetera. Said, and it seems like it was always the right fit for me. How did you know that? And he said, do you remember when we had you take those assessments? And I said, and to be honest, I kind of forgotten that I'd take them, because right or wrong, they never gave me any feedback. So I just kind of forgot about it. But meanwhile, they were looking at it and watching my performance based upon the assessment results. And it was kind of then that I became very interested in this thing called temperament. So temperament is part, not all, but part of self-awareness.
Yeah. We're going to get into how to assess temperament in a little bit, maybe a specific type of assessment that we're going to look at. But, this idea of self-awareness and leadership, is kind of rooted in this idea that leadership starts with self. That before you can lead anybody else, you have to lead yourself. You have to know thyself, if you will. And, but most leadership failures are not necessarily competency issues. They're self-awareness issues that show up in a lack of competency. Would you agree?
I think so. I think that, leading yourself, you're the hardest person you will ever meet that you have to lead.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it in the previous podcast, but, most external situations, conflicts, challenges, you can easily bypass yourself to get to those spaces. And so how much, difficulty can we avoid if we face the person in the mirror and we really learn how to lead ourselves? But to the point of what we're talking about, I can't really lead myself until I really understand myself, until I understand how I'm wired, what my strengths are, what my leanings are, how I am wired to see certain things differently than others. And once again, there are specific assessments that can help us with that, that we will jump into in just a little bit. But in general, Jim, how, in your experience of coaching, how many years now would you say you've been in leadership coaching? Too many to count.
Too many to count. Decades.
Enough. How have you seen different personality types approach things like decision making, conflict, relationships, vision casting? Because it isn't just a set it and forget it, right? Different personality types, different temperaments have different approaches in these areas of leadership, like decision making, conflict, relationships, and vision casting.
Yeah, I like that question. I also like the phrase you coined earlier, where you said that we have in so many words, we have the ability to bypass ourselves into whatever conflict or whatever situation that we're in. And that's pretty insightful, because when we don't take the time to say, I'm feeling angry right now, and a lot of us don't even ask why. I feel threat right now. Many don't even ask why. They simply, that becomes like an automatic trigger that begets some sort of behavior, and they go on living their life that way. But when you are self-aware, it sounds silly, but you go, gosh, I am really frustrated by this. And then you pause and you say, why am I frustrated about it? And that is part of self-awareness, examining, filtering your emotions with your mind, right? All right. Yeah, so I think maybe to try to simplify this as much as I can, if I take one of the oldest, if not the oldest, psychological assessments, they would divide the world up into two parts: sensors and abstract thinkers, intuitives. Half of the world is very now-oriented, very practical, pragmatic. I guess you could say black and white. We give them a nickname. They're the backbone of society. They like doing the repetitive jobs. They like doing the ones with order and predictability. They like that. That is not me. That is not me. The other part of the human equation are the people who think kind of outside the box. They think in the box, but they don't feel limited to what's in the box. They think, I already said abstractly, but they think in terms of theory. They tend to live inside of their own their own mind, more so than even relying on the five senses. So I guess in a weird way, you could say that they don't deny the stimulus of the five senses, but they're not bound to those. They can ward those things off in the laboratory of their own abstractness. So that's how I would start.
That's helpful. I think for where we're going, which is, getting to MBTI assessment, the Myers-Briggs temperament
type indicator.
Type indicator. Yeah. This assessment that allows us to once again understand where we fit in these spaces of insight, how we show up in the world. And so, you've kind of given us a teaser, but how is the MBTI, kind of broken down?
You bet. Well, okay, so we start with the differentiating between introvert, extrovert, and again, the introvert, extrovert. The introvert, generally speaking, and we have to use generalities here because you can put 100 introverts in the same room and they're not all the same. You can put 100 extroverts in the same room, they're not all the same. So there's going to be a variance of these generalities. But people who are introverted, they gain strength, they gain emotional strength, they gain clarity, they gain creativity when they have time alone. But it could be a variety of time alone activities that meet the needs of different introverts. It could be staring at the stars, going to a movie by themselves, reading a book, writing, simply walking down the road and thinking, hiding themselves in a cabin in the woods. I mean, it could be just like I need 15 minutes, every hour to step aside to gather my thoughts. The extrovert, I often say, lives out loud. I see the E also standing for not just extrovert, but expressors. They expressing what they sometimes sense if they're a sensor, or what they feel if they're a feeler, or what they're thinking as an intuitive. They're expressors. Another way I look at it is that extroverts are magnifiers. They're like amplifiers. That's a better word. Amplifiers of what is. They will say out loud what is, where an introvert may not say anything. What's interesting, though, is that would make us think, for example, that most of your public speakers would then obviously be extroverts. But studies have shown that that's not true. The majority of your comedians, stand-up comedians, and particularly the very popular ones, are dominated by introverts. Those that have come to know as orators, many of them are introverts. Now, it kind of makes sense if you take a step back, because they're always thinking about things. They're putting things in logical sense and order. And so by the time they get ready to speak, they speak in such a way. Whereas an extrovert is always speaking, right? And I'm generalizing, but always speaking. So sometimes in an office, you might be tempted to say the extrovert is a better communicator than the introvert. Maybe, maybe not. It just kind of depends. So now if we just do the extremes, and then we'll move on to the next set of letters. The extremes, of course, is that the introvert is off and they're all by themselves. That would be one extreme. The extreme of the extrovert is they run over everybody, with their exuberance. So then what I talked about earlier, I'll just briefly touch on, because I already explained that you can divide the world up into these two letters. Now, why we use N for intuitive has to do with helping people remember. But you get the intuitive and you've got the sensor. So again, you've got the concrete thinker and the abstract thinker. Then you move off to the thinker or the feeler. I likened the thinker to be logical to the point that they have a difficulty making decisions beyond logic. I would give them a nickname saying they can be tough-minded. If you want to have fun with it for a little bit, they can be stubborn. The feeler, on the other hand, has everything that the thinker has, But they have this unique ability to agree with the thinker that is logical, but decide to do something completely different anyway. So I'd like to say if the thinker has 5 speeds, the feeler has 6. And the nickname I would give a feeler is fond-hearted. So the difference between tough-minded and fond-hearted. Then finally we get to the J and the P. And then the J is that somebody who is generally organized. They like to organize. They like to plan. These are calendar people. These are people that when you make if they make a decision, they have a hard time changing their decision because somehow it's attached to their character. So if they say they're going to be there Thursday night, they're going to probably be there Thursday night. The P, on the other hand, they're more option oriented. They're very flexible. When they say they'll be there Thursday night, they'll say that will be one of their considerations for Thursday night, and they may decide that at Thursday at 5:30 or 6:30 or 7 o'clock. So that's just kind of a fun little overview. And then of course you've got to mix and match all of those, and that comes out with what we call your temperaments and then your temperament types.
Great leaders don't ignore their past; they learn from it. Every decision you've made, every mistake, every win, every failure. It's all shaping the leader you're becoming. In Story, the art of learning from your past, you'll discover how to turn experience into wisdom, setbacks into strategy, and pain into purpose. This isn't just a book about reflection, it's a playbook for growth. If you want to lead with clarity, humility, and confidence, your story matters. Learn from it. Grab your copy of Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past, where books are sold. How many combinations are there?
There are 4 temperaments and 16 types.
When we get into this, it can get discouraging for people because they can almost feel like I'd rather not even go down this path because...
But we can help, because the reason why, sorry to interrupt, the reason why I just now realized there's 4 temperaments, 16 types is because, like in the book of Ezekiel, which is an Old Testament biblical book, there's a strange, bizarre inference to the temperaments of mankind, and it's done in 4 word pictures. It is a human, a eagle, a lion, and an ox. And so the ox is, that backbone of society, worker, a real hard worker. The eagle is strategic. They're way up in the sky, and then you got the lion, who is, we always make fun of them. They're either amazing us with their prowess and their talent, or they're taking a nap. And then you have the human, which we kind of label like the intermediary of God and creation, kind of the empathetic, the humanities comes out of that, the one that is cultivating and stewarding the earth.
In this, space of temperament and assessments, a discouraging place to be is to feel like once I know my personality type or my temperament, that's my destiny. But why is that wrong to see this as like, oh, this is a death sentence, or this is like I can never change from this? Or
what's really weird is if you take the knowledge of your temperament out of the equation, most likely God's gravity pulls you in the direction of your temperament anyway. It's occasionally you'll find exceptions to that, but once somebody's like in their mid-30s or on, you will often find them in a career path that would match their temperament. So, I say, man, God knows what he's doing, and he winks his eye at our little assessments and say, that's good, Johnny. You're
just clarifying what was already always true in some sense.
Yeah. But I would say this, remember though, that a lot of these temperament assessments that you would take, which I would encourage you to do it, because it gives you a head start. It helps you. It takes away some of the trial and error. Just like if you lived in the first century and you had good mentors around you, the same thing, because they noticed you from the time you were a child, so they can see all that. So like when somebody who's 23 takes a temperament assessment and they come home excited, tell their mom and dad about it, their mom and dad go, yeah, well, we've seen that. May not have been the terminology we use, but we've seen that in you. Remember that you have variances within those temperaments. Some of those traits that I talked about, well, they're not all the same in everybody. So it's not just 4 temperaments and 16 types. How many nuances must there be? I mean, there must be thousands of nuances. So you can get, but I would also say what you add to that, Winston, is you add what psychologists would call, conditioning, or what I simply call the GBU, the good, bad, and ugly of what you've experienced in life. So I do believe that the temperament, I don't believe that your temperament changes. I believe that you become more informed as to what your temperament is, and therefore, like a tool, you're able to use it more like a master craftsman in how to use your temperament versus be a victim of your temperament. I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And then your temperament has a lot to do, though, to an earlier question that you're asking of how you deal with the things, in life. So that has to be examined as well. And that all pushes up to one's character. And the great news is I may not be able to change what happened to me in my life. I may not be able to change my temperament, but I am able to be informed by both of those and make intentional decisions and shape my character. My character, which is in the very end result, what I do. And that I can change, and that's what matters.
I can, attest to this, and we can have a little bit of fun and kind of, unpacking our specific MBTI. But, as an introvert, so understanding my temperament or a part of it, and then understanding my conditioning, growing up in New York City, growing up to a Puerto Rican mother and a Jamaican father, both cultures that are fiery, both cultures that expressive, and then in an expressive city, understanding that I almost endured that culture or that environment, and coming out of that, not just introversion, but then my conditioning almost had me sway socially to seclusion or to not being expressive on purpose
for survival.
Yeah. And so having to, work that out in my leadership and understand, okay, so not only by nature am I more reserved, but by nurture I'm more reserved. So if I have an assignment or a mission on my life that requires me to not be reserved, I have to be intentional and do the work socially and in all these facets to leverage my conditioning and my temperament to serve people and not just to be comfortable. And so that's just one little snapshot for anybody listening, where once again, to your point, this is just how I am. Well, I have all the reasons for, for me to be like, well, this is just how I am. I'm not going to, be outgoing. I'm not going to communicate. I'm not going to be literally talking on a podcast right now. I could be at home, in a closet shivering, because I'm scared of the world or whatever. But I've had to do the work and learn how to get outside of myself and to not see this, to your point, as a reality where I'm a victim of this.
Yeah.
But actually,
that's really good.
This is a tool. This is a superpower.
Yeah.
I can use this to my advantage.
Yeah, that's a really good. I've never heard it really expressed that way, and I wonder why it is that we would see ourselves as limited to our temperament versus see it as the foundation of our life, right? Because case in point, I just said that I'm not saying every wonderful public speaker is an introvert, because I know wonderful public speakers who are extroverts. But you're an introvert and you're an amazing speaker. But I've noticed that if you could, reading a book is what you would love to do. That would be your tendency. And so when you do get up and speak, though, I often think, well, where did all that come from, right? You've been storing that up. You've been thinking through it. You've been, working through it. So that's a great example.
Yeah. So talk us through, everybody listening, watching, our temperaments, and just kind of giving them kind of a bird's eye view about INTJs and maybe unpacking what that means. Yeah.
So the Myers-Briggs Indicator has labeled both of us as INTJs, and INTJs are one of the least in numerical percentage-wise on the planet. So I don't know what that means, if God's just putting up with us or if we have a special calling, on our lives. And the nickname for the INTJ, the introverted, intuitive thinking judger, is rational, That would be our temperament. Our temperament is rational, and that's the combination of the intuitive and the thinker. And then they give us a nice, fun name called mastermind that all of a sudden you and I feel really smart, and what's really close to that, and I forget what the letter adjustment is, but with this a slight adjustment, another title given to ours is architect. So, mastermind architect. Another visual is the eagle. So 30,000 feet, we kind of thinking things that way. But another one is a field marshal, but not the one that goes with the troops out into battle. There's two kinds of generals, as I understand it. Boots on the ground generals. Is you've got the ENTJ, the more extroverted type, and they go with the troops into battle. And they are more tactical. What they teach us about ours is that though we can be tactical. Thank you. We're more strategic. So we're kind of a little bit in the safety of the tent, off of the battlegrounds with the maps in front of us, creating the strategies for the other generals to carry out. So that's another picture. That's why you'd prefer time in the library. You'd prefer time wherever you can get it alone. That's where you would want to do it. Now, are we the same person?
Not at all.
Not at all.
For obvious reasons.
For those of you who've never met us and you're not watching on YouTube, that's an inside joke. So for example, I don't have our assessments in front of us, but most likely we're going to differ in every one of those columns to a percentage of what percentage are we introverted, what percentage are we intuitive, what percentage are we thinkers, and what percentage are we judgers.
In your personal experience, I might be able to piggyback off of yours, but how has knowing your temperament and your MBTI impacted your leadership?
It has shown me more clearly what I'm naturally gifted at and what I need to work harder at, because again, I am working towards character. I'm not working to justify my temperament. And so we just did an episode about conflict, and so what my temperament would do about conflict is I'd be thinking about strategies, or if I even should go to that battle, is that battle worth it? And if I go, what am I trying to accomplish? What's the best way to do this? Do I make it an event? Do I try to chop it up? Do I want them to know we're in a conflict? Do I not want them to know we're in a conflict? So I tend to do that. Now that can be good, but I can also talk myself out of having a difficult conversation if it needs. Whereas an ENTJ, somebody who's going to express more naturally, they will get into the conflict, and sometimes they shouldn't, but many times they should, and they will. So that's that. Is that example?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking on that, me personally, I have become more aware that I can present in certain spaces as slow to react, or even apathetic to
stoic
certain causes.
Yeah.
Where internally, man, I'm running 10,000 miles an hour.
Right.
I'm fast in my mind.
Right.
And then once
we're actually giving mercy to those people, because if we unleashed, they'd be destroyed by all the intellect that would just flow out.
What's happening? What is even? It's a fire hose. And but you've actually coached me in this where I have to verbalize why I might seem slow to respond, because I am strategizing, because I am thinking. Because
if you're
there's
thinking,
so much happening.
You need to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm thinking." As you're talking, I'm thinking, and that gives feedback to the person that you're not apathetic towards what they're saying. You're not, but that's the way you work. You go into. It's almost like you have this little person that's listening, and then they translate to you on the inside, but and then you're like listening in, so it doesn't really look like you're listening to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're barely scratching the surface, but as we land the plane, hopefully we've given you enough to be hungry and curious about this yourself, but maybe just giving some practical handles to all of these types of not every MBTI, but the introvert, the extrovert, the thinker, feeler, intuitive, and sensor. Maybe just giving a snapshot of leadership application. So for the introvert, what would be maybe kind of just a spitball encouragement for a leader who is an introvert?
Yeah, protect your time. You need to have that time, because if you protect your time, you will be more extroverted when you need to be where the people need you to be. But you're going to get burned out if you don't block time.
What about the extrovert?
Oh, for the extrovert. Well, since I'm not one, that's difficult.
If you're having to coach an extrovert right now, what would you tell
Oh
them?
gosh, I coach a lot of experts. So, I'm sorry, extroverts. What I have to kind of do with extroverts is I ask them to, when I block time, the minimum time I'd block for anything would be an hour, and to me that is short circuiting. So with extroverts, having them block an hour for them to do something that doesn't include conversation. Now, again, this is a general truth. Some extroverts are going to throw stuff at us right now. So I just try to say, well, what if you took a half an hour and you work on reading that chapter, or you did this? Because a lot of extroverts will say they're not readers, as an example. I would say make sure that you are taking enough time to have positive inputs, into your life, even if it's smaller. You don't need. Granted, you don't need them as much as the introvert does, because you're engaging yourself in a lot of conversations, and so you do take them in.
What about the thinker?
The thinker, if they want to connect with others, I'm going to go back to the extrovert. Remember that you talk over a lot of people, and maybe try to practice giving them some space. Okay, so to the thinker, it's kind of what you and I were just talking about. I think that's where the stoicism comes from. Mostly the T, not just the T, but mostly the T. Also comes from the J. Tell people that you care, even if your behaviors don't seem to show, and then maybe you can get some behaviors that will follow in your own way.
That's good. What about the feeler?
The feeler needs to have a thinker as a friend, and a lot of feelers will marry a thinker, because the thinker will calm them down. Like in my family, I'm kind of known as, I can get upset. Make no mistake about it. Introverts can get upset. In fact, when an introvert gets upset, you better take cover, because it's been building. But yeah, the feeler needs a thinker to slow them down, because the feeler will go faster than the thinker.
What would you say to the intuitive?
The intuitive is, if you want to connect with people who are not intuitive, you really got to work at identifying where they're at. Be curious as to what they're talking about at their elevation. I would say it's important to affirm what the other person is talking about. Try to connect, at that level before you start applying your theories.
And the sensor, what would you say to the sensor?
Very similar as the F. Slow down. Maybe evaluate. The sensor tends to do what's in front of them, and learning a little bit from the intuitive to back away for a little bit, reassess, and because not everything in front of you needs to be done. And I know that's cussing to them. It's just not true.
And as we wrap up this podcast, we might need to do another one, because I feel like there's way more to unpack.
You're holding me back. Yeah.
What's one thing every leader should know about themselves when we're talking about self-awareness?
They should know where they really need to complement their leadership abilities, and let people know that. So though it kind of can feel like conflict, affirm those who have a different skill set, different temperament set than you do, and explain to them why they're important to be on your team. And though at times it'll feel like we're talking in two different languages, we just got to work at it, because we really do need to, we need to be a team. Team is what wins.
Last thought here as we close: knowing your strengths, knowing yourself isn't really an excuse for your weakness. Like knowing yourself doesn't give you permission to just kind of say this is who I'll always be.
Right.
It's actually a responsibility to steward your strengths, to steward the things about you that give you leverage and give you the ability to execute, to lead people well, to create environments and experiences, to ultimately be a steward of the role and the space, no matter if you're in the marketplace, no matter if you're in the ministry, wherever you find yourself and whatever work that your hands find to do. This is a responsibility to steward, not an opportunity to say, a limiter, as we've been talking about. This is not an excuse to be limited. This is actually a foundation to build on in your leadership. And so, any last thoughts, Jim, as we close?
I thought you said that really well. I think that we are all called to get better. And it doesn't mean that you take what your temperament doesn't have and you make that a strength. That's not what you said. What you said is to be aware of that and how that might negatively impact those around. And so, how can that be shored up in a way that the team is served? So that way they can appreciate what you bring to the table, not what you can't bring to the table.
Great. Well, we hope something here has helped you to become more self-aware. We encourage you, implore you to explore assessments like the MBTI and others that are going to help you, once again, become more aware, more cognitively, consciously intentional about your leadership so that you can make today count, because today does count. And we believe that, man, everything rises and falls on leadership. And so until next time, we'll see you right here on the Today Count Show. Thanks for spending part of your day with us on the Today Count Show. If today's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you grow, share it with someone in your circle, because we're better when we grow together. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And remember, real change doesn't happen someday. It happens today. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, keep making today count.